Shenmue for the Dreamcast.
Yes.
That was the first game you beat this year.
Yeah, actually, we played it a lot over Christmas.
Yeah.
It was our winter game. It was a very relaxing game. It was perfect for what we were going through.
Where did you hear about Shenmue and why did you think you wanted to play it?
Well, I had heard about Shenmue when I first got a Dreamcast because one of the first things I do is I get on the internet and start looking up highly recommended games for that console. I never remember Shenmue being like in the top 10 Dreamcast games of all time, best Dreamcast games of all time, but I always saw it in the honorable mentions. And after playing the game, I understand why, because it's a game that I think you have to have a certain type of mindset. If you're the type of person who plays video games because you like fast-pacedness, you like action, you like getting your reflex tested, I don't think Shenmue is necessarily that, which is kind of weird because it has tons of Quicktime events in it, and it's got fighting in it. And I think that's one reason why it gets an honorable mention is because I think people have the expectation when they go into Shenmue, because you look on the back of the cover and it's like, brought to you by the creators of Virtua Fighter 2. And you're like, whoa, this is a fighting game, or this is an adventure game that's got fighting game mechanics. And I think if you look at it from that perspective, you're going to be greatly disappointed. It's basically just like a 3D adventure game for console that takes place in Japan.
So what did you think of the fighting that was in it?
Oh, I thought the fighting was terrible. The camera wouldn't cooperate. It kind of just did its own thing all the time. Another problem with it is the game does try to, even though it doesn't play like Virtua Fighter, it does try to play like a fighting game. Problem with that is that the directional inputs change depending on how the camera is facing your character. And that's really frustrating, especially in a 3D game where you can't keep the camera still. There'd be almost like Mortal Kombat inputs, like double tap forward and press punch or something like that. I would try to do one move, and the camera would be acting all schizophrenic on me, and a different move would come out because what I thought was double tap forward, the camera didn't think was double tap forward. They thought it was up. In my opinion, that was really bad programming. The combat was kept to a minimal. Shenmue brings the polar opposite out. There's not people who are like, oh, this is an okay game. There's either people who love Shenmue for what it is, or people just absolutely hate Shenmue, which is why, like I said, it's constantly getting honorable mentions, but it never gets on any top 10s. The people who hate Shenmue, I think they have valid reasons to hate Shenmue. It's not their style of humor. They don't like walking around talking to people. The voice acting is terrible. But those are the exact same reasons why some people, myself included, love Shenmue. Like my favorite, we'll just use my favorite line. He'll be walking around, he'll go up to a random person and be like, do you know where I can find Chinese people? And then the person will turn around and respond and be like, Rio. I hear there's Chinese people at the Chinese restaurant. And then it'll go back to Rio, and Rio will be like, the Chinese restaurant. But it does sound like for the localization of the game, they literally just had people in the office read their lines and then compress the audio and then just kind of threw the audio, copy and pasted the audio throughout the game. So I really like it for that reason. And the thing that's so awesome is I heard that they did the exact same thing with Shenmue 3 that came out last year, which is another reason why people absolutely hate that game. But I'm excited for it because I don't know any other game that does it quite that dramatically.
Mm-hmm. Besides walking around and talking to people and then bad fighting mechanics,
right? What
else does this game involve?
And this game kept me engaged in the cutscenes with the Quicktime events, and I never experienced that in any other previous game until Resident Evil 4. Another reason why people hate the game Shenmue is because a lot of people hate Quicktime events. Besides, there's exploring, fighting, and Quicktime events. If it wasn't for Shenmue's personality and just how different of a game it is compared to anything else I've ever played, I don't think I would have kept playing it. Because in all honesty, even though the story starts off interesting, it drags. There's a lot of just wandering around talking to people. There were times that it made me laugh. Because the story, in my opinion, wasn't really that great. I mean, he's on this revenge quest to avenge his father, but he spends like a good 85% of the game just wandering around talking to people in his hometown. But despite the terrible voice acting and the slow pacing story, the characters still somehow felt human. Even though the animations were super robotic and the audio files were obviously copy-pasted clipped in, there was something still very human about the whole experience, and I think that has a lot to do with just simply like the limitations of the hardware of the Dreamcast, as well as just I really like Japanese culture. It being a modern day Japanese game was just kind of a nice touch. So like the house you stay in is really peaceful. That time period in our life, you and I, what we were going through during that first month of 2020, without going into detail, I think that game was perfect for us. And Shenmue was a great distraction without feeding any kind of anxiety. Like a lot of games tend to create anxiety within the game because of just how intense they are. And the fact that it was so low key and laid back, while at the same time being a distraction from the current things that were going on in our lives, I think that also helped keep us engaged in that game. But with that being said, the characters start to grow on you, and as a result, I think today I could jump right into Shenmue 2 because I've already been invested in those characters from Shenmue 1.
Well, if you were to rate it, what would you rate Shenmue and why?
If you were to rate the game off of personal experience, I would give it a 9. And the reason why is because it came just at the right time in my life. Looking back in retrospect, and as someone who would be trying to recommend Shenmue to other people, I think it would fall much more in the category of maybe a 7.8, 7.9. Reason being for that is that it's very hard to get into if you don't care about the story and don't care about the characters. And most gamers tend to be hyperactive and adrenaline fueled. And I think that it would be very hard to try to justify this game to the average gamer, whether he be a casual gamer or a hardcore gamer, just because of its flaws. Like I said, people who criticize this game and they give reasons why this game sucks are all the reasons why I love this game. It's the flaws in the game is what gives it such great personality. I think Shenmue is just a flawed masterpiece.
Try asking Chinese people about Chinese.
Do you know any Chinese?
Sorry, man. But see that travel agency over there? They get some Chinese customers.
Excuse me.
Yes?
I'm looking for someone who knows about Chinese people. Do you know anyone?
Why don't you try the Chinese restaurant near the drugstore?
You mean the Bajiji?
Yes? I'm sure their employees are all Chinese.
Thank you very much. Tao-san,
Yes?
are there any other Chinese people around here?
Why do you want to know about other Chinese?
Nothing, really.
Is it something to do with what happened to your father?
Yes.
Oh no. Not all Chinese people are bad.
I understand that, but the only clue I have is that they were Chinese. Please, is there anything you could tell me?
You say Chinese people around here?